This episode is brought to you by Kia's first 3-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Ian Reynolds about developing effective habits and building them into virtues in the workplace. Ian Reynolds, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have the chance to talk with you. You have such an interesting background. I think it'll be really beneficial to the listeners today as we have a discussion surrounding the connection between individuals and their habits, how those lead into developing virtues, and how that connects back to people management in the workplace and having effective organizations. So that'll be our focus, our topic for today. As we get started, I want to share Ian's bio with all the listeners. Ian Reynolds is a partner and chief solutions architect at ZibTech, a software development firm focused on helping businesses of all sizes in the U.S. solve their core problems with software. They empower entrepreneurs, growth companies, enterprises, and visionary firms to achieve greater profitability and efficiency, valuation, and ultimate success by building the right tools through customer software. Ian has spent the better part of his career in consulting and has served in a diverse set of industries such as finance, oil and gas, retail, power, field services, midstream energy, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, transactional finance, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, e-commerce, retail, and software development. And that is quite the diverse set of industries as you move through your career. But Ian, it's truly a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for joining us. Anything you would like to add by way of personal background as we dive on in today?
I think that was it's really a mouthful in terms of the introduction. Thanks for that. Consulting gives you the opportunity to really see and do a lot of things, and broad base of my career has been sort of in a consulting sphere. So really get to see a lot of things, good and bad. And so that's great.
Excellent. And maybe before we really launch into the discussion, you can tell us a little bit about your role at ZibTech as partner and chief solutions architect.
Sure. So when a company comes to us with a problem that they need to solve, and they're not, they may not have the expertise in-house, they may not have an engineering team in-house, or if they do, it's not sort of the full gambit in terms of an engineering team. Maybe they have 1 or 2 engineers on the team. Oftentimes, if you're building a solution that is enterprise grade or ultimately going to be its own product, you really need to kind of consult with someone who can not only understand, hey, where is the market going from a technical standpoint, where's it going from the standpoint of, what does future innovation look like, but also what is the business context for which we need to build this solution and then integrate it. So in layman's terms, my role is to really push back on some of the ideas that we get from clients and say, no, like focus on the core aspect of what you're trying to build, because fundamentally you're trying to solve one problem first for your customer, and then you're going to solve multiple problems by building a solution. So in a nutshell, I'm a guy who says no, but politely and helpfully.
Well, good. It's good to learn to say no in a variety of ways in life. I think that's an effective skill to develop, and it's one I don't always exercise well. I like to say yes to people. I like to please people. I like to make people feel good, and
Right.
and sometimes that means I end up getting myself into situations or agreeing to take on additional projects or roles that probably I shouldn't, to
Mm-hmm.
to avoid getting overwhelmed or overworked. But it also, like you said, you're not doing anyone any favors if you go along with an idea that probably may not be fully developed, or perhaps they haven't thought through everything, or they haven't really seen how this can go to market, or so on and so forth, right? And so
Right.
having that healthy level of pushback and playing devil's advocate and really helping people think through the nitty gritty of all the different pieces of their ideas and what they're planning to do, that's really important, and that is the role of a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that in the tech space with software solutions. I do similar work in the organizational space, working with organizational leaders in terms of how they interface with their people, but also in terms of the organizational structures, the systems, the policies, the practices that lead to the type of culture, whether healthy or unhealthy, that an organization might have, and then how that then translates into an organization's utilization of its people to interface with the consumer, right? So
Right.
we do similar work in that regard in terms of the consultancy relationship, I think, and that's important for people, to remember as they're seeking, whether you're a coach or you're a consultant, regardless of really the industry you're in. I think the same principles apply, and we need to be thoughtful about that. Now, as we start to move into the discussion about habits and yourself as taking a classical approach, a classical educational approach to people management, what do you mean by that? And then we can launch into habits and
Sure.
virtues.
So my undergraduate education is basically in classics, right? I have a humanities degree. I was reading, Plato, Aristotle, all these things, and there's a lot of fundamental ideas that have built Western society to be as successful as it is, and those ideas are things that are true of the human person. Is because there's observations about human nature over a very long period of time by a large number of people, and discussed and debated and wars fought, etc., about the nature of sort of who the human person is. Now, I'm not gonna, that's a lot to get into here, so I'll stick to the high level. But the idea is that there are certain sort of fundamental obvious things, and every 20 or so years, right, you have a new generation of folks who move into the working world and need to be trained and need to be skilled up and need to be made productive, right? I didn't really learn anything until in terms of work until I really got into the work environment, and that's going to be true of most people. We're hiring very smart people, wonderful PhDs, MAs, and bachelors of science, et cetera, but there's still certain fundamental skills that they lack. So we do really simple things to build habits that are going to lead people to be much more productive. So I'll talk about some of these things that we do in the course of our sort of project work, and then I'll talk about how that lends itself to organizational efficiency. So one of the things we make our engineers do every single day is they have to write a status update, a daily status update. This is the bullet points of what I did. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but if they have to share that with their senior manager, and then they have to share that with their project manager, and then their senior manager, and ultimately it does go to me and other partners that can see it and go review it, they know that when they start their workday and end their workday, they're responsible for a deliverable. So what does it do to the person? Well, it makes them in the habit of, okay, I've got to plan my day so that I'm doing something productive. Because if I'm reporting every day that, hey, I didn't do anything today, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get put into much harder work, and so we're building the habit of planning your workday. That's one thing. The next thing is we are encouraging and structuring the work that they do from the project management and project planning level where they're doing the most difficult work that they need to do for the day in the morning. Okay, well, what does that do? Well, it means that the rest of the day can be used for fun activities or activities that are much more creative. But psychologically, they are removing any impediment to really kind of the creative work, right? And so we basically push, we say grandma's rule. Everyone has to do grandma's rule. You have to eat your vegetables before you can have your dessert. And so we structure intentionally our meetings and our sort of difficult components of sort of engineering work to occur first thing. Get it done, get it out of the way. And so I can go on, there's like 50 or so things like that. But broadly speaking, to build an engineering culture, we also have to build a people-focused culture where we're looking at what are the fundamental skills gaps that everyone has, and it's being, extremely productive. It's being open and honest about your communication in terms of the workload that you're undertaking. It is fighting these very natural human tendencies to not do bad things, but to avoid pain and seek pleasure activities, right? Like I'm gonna sneak into the conference room and watch some YouTube videos, pretend like I'm working, right? Like we are structuring things to really be a high performance engineering culture.
I love that. It's a great overview, and I love the connection back to the classics. And you're absolutely right that a lot of this isn't rocket science, and in fact, we've lived for generations and generations, and wars have been fought and won and lost based around these types of these basic human tendencies and these basic types of attributes. So this isn't rocket science. It's not new. We've been facing these same issues over and over and over again in societies throughout the history of mankind, and they play out in organizations again and again, over and over again, in very similar and predictable ways. And so I like how you framed some of what you try to do in your organization to make it people-centric, to make it an accountability culture, to make sure that people recognize that they are reliant on each other and that they do need to perform, but also that you'll be there as an organization to support them and to help them to develop the necessary skills and abilities to be effective, right? That you're not just throwing them to the wolves, but you want them to succeed, but you're going to hold them accountable to that success as you support them. I think that's all so very vital, so important. So let's talk a little bit more about this idea that you raised, about building upon our habits, developing effective habits and building them into virtues. What do you see as like the biggest important key virtues that you want to see in your workers in the workplace, and how do you start to build that into the culture and into the habit building, as you are framing it?
Mm-hmm. So there is always a tendency for folks to be self-seeking, right? Like no matter what you do, right? You can speak of like Montesquieu's spirit of the laws, right? There's self-interest well understood, and then there's self-interest. Well, we want self-interest well understood. So for someone to be a team leader, one of the things that we do in every new set of recruits that we bring in when we're training people up is we say, it doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how much experience you have, it doesn't matter what your background is. We have had team members who have had maybe 1 or 2 years of experience lead teams of 17, 24 people because they were just that good, right? So we immediately sort of start the discussion saying, look, we're a meritocracy, and it really just, that's the way it's going to be. Now, we start there, and people say, okay, wow, great, right? So let me learn more. Then what we do is we go into, here are the characteristics of the people that are able to achieve those things. And here is what is needed of them. And we go through, 20 or so points, right? There's communication, there's honesty, there's dependability, if you're not dependable, that's probably one of the bigger ones, right? Folks who work at, even fast food restaurants are incredibly dependable. They show up on time. That's a habit, right? Showing up on time, and then it becomes a virtue. It's just, I'm going to be there when I say I'm going to be there. And we go through sort of 20 or so of these bullet points. And what we then do is we tell them, look, you're going to be graded. Your pay and your position is going to be graded by a set of people. It's not going to be graded by one person. We don't like the kind of one person determines your fate. We just take an average. We show people a scorecard, and we have a scorecard. And obviously, there's some stuff that's quantitative because we're looking at actual output of code and tickets accepted, et cetera, these things. And then there's also some subjective things, but it balances out in terms of getting somebody a pretty rough score. If you get 100, which has never happened, you're probably talking to me. So we structure things in a way where we're saying, like, look, you stepped out of an academic environment. Now you're in the working environment where your ability to regurgitate things is not as important as your ability to actually deploy solutions, and your ability to communicate, and your ability to be creative. And when we go into our reviews with those parties, we say, look, you're doing really well on these 5 or 6 points. Let's not worry about these 20 or so other items that you need to improve on. Let's pick 3 and let's work on these 3 because you're probably the closest at getting these over. All right, so good. Next review. You've got those 3 things mastered. Great. Let's go to the next 3. Let's go to the next 3. Let's go to the next 3. And by doing that, by taking small incremental steps at improving character skills and basically in-job skills, we have been able to take people that were maybe not even doing super well in their career, right? But we knew they had all this diverse experience. They just weren't put into a machine that turned the Play-Doh mold into the dinosaur shape. And we have been able to form people into leaders and form people into really productive engineers and team leads and project managers by just focusing on one skill at a time. And it's carrot and stick, like with anything. But if you're really focused on defining what those aspects of success look like, and then you're able to help the person really specifically say, here's what you need to do for that thing, you're going to be able to first get them to make it a habit. And then after it's a habit that is just second nature, they're scoring 5 on it every quarterly review, then it has become a virtue. And then you just move to the next thing.
Yeah. And you focus on one thing at a time, like you said, because, there's lots of research on how to develop habits, for example. And one of the first things that you want to avoid is trying to do everything. Yep. And it's like with New Year's resolutions. Most people fall off their New Year's resolutions within a few weeks because and it's fairly predictable depending on a variety of characteristics of how you set up the goal and as you're trying to develop the habit. And it's not easy to develop habits. And you're talking about even going a step further and going from developing habits to moving those into building virtues. That's not an easy process, but as you focus on one thing at a time and developing the skills, the knowledge, you're developing the habit around that thing. And as you get supported to do it, as your leadership team supports your people to develop that habit, it is very, very possible to do it. And then you're building the capacity and capabilities of your people, which is so important for your organization. If you want your organization to continually be innovative and productive and effective and to provide good solutions for your clients, you have to have capable people. And it's a competitive industry to get good talent. And so you're looking for good talent anywhere, recognizing that they may not have, as you bring people in, they may not have all of the habits that you want to see. They may not have all the skills that you would like to see, but then it's your job to help build that capacity. So I love that. I love that focus. I love how you, the work that you're doing to move people in that direction. And it's not easy work, but it's valuable and important work. And it's rewarding work too, because I think about it as a leader. I believe in the idea of servant leadership, and whether other people buy into that philosophy or not, is not really important. One of the fundamental components to that is empowerment, and seeing my role as a leader, a key role in being, I'm going to develop my people. I'm going to help them become the best they can possibly be. They're going to maximize their potential while I'm their leader. And some of that is altruistic, perhaps, because I find meaning and purpose in helping build and develop others. But some of it can be self-interested as well, because I know that I'm going to be the most successful leader I can be as I help my people be the most successful they can be. And that will help the organization to become the best it can be, to provide the best products and services for our consumer. So it all comes back to that, and everything that you're describing will lead to that kind of successful maximizing of the human capital potential of the organization.
Right. And to speak of how we know it works, we have taken people who have no sort of base aptitude for engineering, but they have the other sort of, we recognize, because these are things we track and measure, they have the other sort of fundamental underlying behavioral skill sets that would lend themselves to being successful. And we've been able to take those folks, simply off the street, stick them in front of a computer, train them up, and have had them be wildly successful. So, it's the measure of a person's ability to grow rather than the person's innate ability.
Yeah, I love that. And it's the whole idea behind having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And I see a lot of leaders that approach their people from a fixed mindset perspective. And it's unfortunate because it's just limiting. And your organization and how you work with your people is a prime example of growth mindset and taking people where they're at and helping build them into something that's more than maybe what they even thought they were capable of. I love that. Well, Ian, it has been a real pleasure talking with you, learning more about your organization, learning more about your philosophy, your approach to people management, and really empowering people and helping them to develop. It's been a great, fun discussion today. Before we close, though, I want to give you a chance to share with the listeners how they can find out more about you, get connected, and learn more about your organization.
Sure. So we're check out zibtek.com, zibtek.com. We post pretty regularly in our blog, keep the resources really up to date. We're talking about both technical and sort of these operational sort of components. If you want to reach out and make sure that I see that communication, email hello@zibtek.com, and I will see that and typically respond. So that's us in a nutshell.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ian. It has really been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out to Ian, get connected, find out what his organization can do for you. And I hope everyone stays healthy and safe, and that everyone can find meaning and purpose in work. And I hope you'll have a great week. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe, and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.